Hello, I'm Penny and I'm here to show you some more recipes. So now we're going to make a shortbread, which is like a biscuit, and then we're going to make a fruitful. And the fruitful is a lovely, summery, easy to make dish that everybody can join in with. And the shortbread is really quite easy as well. It'll be a little bit noisy when I use the mixer, but I can also show you how to do it by hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure out our ingredients first. So on your recipe sheet you will have instructions. So I've got a pair of scales. If you haven't got scales, I will try and convert it into cups for you. What we need to do is we need to put everything in the bowl and then mix it. So the recipe says 150 grams of plain flour. You've all got a bag of plain flour. That bag of plain flour, you may need it for another recipe later in the series, so don't use it all up now because you will only get the one bag of flour. So we need 150 grams, and at the moment I've got 1 cup here as well, so let's just check. So it's going to be about 1.5 cups of flour. And then we're going to need 1/2 cup of caster sugar. Again, you've got caster sugar and you've got a small bag, a 500-gram bag, which will be used for another recipe later in the series. So we need 50 grams of this, which is a light 1/2 cup. Okay, so we've got your flour and your sugar in there, and now we need your butter, and you need 100 grams of cold butter, and we're going to cut it up into little cubes to go into the mixture. So 100 grams. Now if I tell you that this is this has got on the edge there the little measurement, so you can see what 100 grams, each of those little marks is 25 grams, so 100 grams is that much. So I don't need the scales because we want 100 grams, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, which is that much. So it's not half, it's less than half. And we'll just put that away, so we don't need that anymore. And we don't need those anymore. And then I said you're going to cut this into cubes, little cubes. Cubes or squares like that. And that's going to go into the bowl like that. Oops. Now you can make, so this is going into there. Now we can do 2 things with this. I can either get the mixer on it and I can whiz it up and make a lot of noise, or I can get my hands in here, and it's quite difficult to show you, but I'm going to try by doing this. So what I'm doing is I'm literally putting the butter and the flour and the sugar between my fingers and sort of crumbing it between my fingers like this. It's exactly the same way that you make a crumble. And this is going to look like, eventually this is going to look like breadcrumbs when all that fat is mixed into the sugar and the you don't want to handle this too much because you don't want the butter to get too warm. So even though you've got little hands who want to help, just make sure that they're clean and make sure that they don't spend time doing this, because this is not what you want. You want to be very light with this. It doesn't take very long. This is nearly all mixed in. And as it's mixed in like this, it will start to come together like a pastry. Very similar to a pastry actually, but obviously it's a lot sweeter, and it is a bread dough. And you can see, I think you can see that as I'm working it in, it's beginning to clump up and mix. So you don't really need the mixture at all. That is beginning to. So the recipe says you can then, you put this onto a floured board and you can use a rolling pin to roll it out, and then you can use cutters and cut it out. Or, now look, how quick was that? That's almost completely mixed. And I don't really want to put too much pressure on that because I don't want it to be a heavy dough. So there you are. That's my shortbread. All mixed in, there's nothing left in the bowl. I think you'll agree that's pretty good. So just take what's off my fingers. Again, you're going to give them a quick wash. Now, one thing is I just need to check the temperature of my oven because it needs to be cooked at 170 degrees or 150 for a fan. And I've got a fan oven, so I'm going to put my oven down to 150. Oops. And you want your oven to be ready and hot for the shortbread to go into. So my suggestion is you take a nice baking tin, you have a piece of parchment paper, you lay your parchment paper in there, and then you, as I said, you can take a rolling pin and gently roll it out with some flour. Let's just move that out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. So there's the flour. Let's get rid of that hole. A little bit of flour on my rolling pin as well. And then just very gently push down on it and then turn it. And every time you turn it the same way. So turn, a couple of little gentle, see I'm not pushing down, I'm just doing it really gently. And then it is it's what we call very short. It's called shortbread, and it is very short. So you really don't really want to add too much flour either because you're going to spoil. And shortbread, when you buy it in the shops, is usually quite thick. You also want to try and always roll it in the same direction if you can. And this is why actually doing it in cutters is good. Or you can take a knife and you can make your fingers. So what you can do, I'm just going to demonstrate. It's fun with the children to have cutters. I'm just cutting it down. I'm going to take that little bit away. Like that. Into fingers. Okay, so some of these bits are a bit ragged, but we'll be able to use those again. Cut them down again. Remember, this is to go with the fruit full, so you want to be able to dip your biscuits in the fruit full. So there we are. Just going to very carefully pop these on the tray, like lovely fingers. So you can see them. And once again, you can see this makes quite a lot of biscuits. So if you only want to make a few now, you can, which is what I will do, I'll just fill up this tray. You could make it a little bit thicker, it's a little bit thin. Right, I got a bit carried away with my rolling. I'm going to take a fork and I'm just going to very gently prick 3 little pricks, 3 little forks along. I'm doing it diagonally, you can do it straight, you can do whatever. But it's a gentle, you don't need to stab at it. Just like that. And if you've got a little bit of caster sugar left, what we're going to do is I've got a little bit of caster sugar left. I'm going to take a little teaspoon and I'm going to take a tiny bit and just very, very carefully, you can see just put a little bit on all of them. Don't want it too sweet. And there's your shortbread fingers ready to go in the oven. So they're going to go into the oven at 170 or 150 for a fan, gas 3, 3 to 4, maybe 4. Again, it depends on how hot your oven is, and it sounds a strange thing to say, I've said it before, but some people's ovens are fierce and some people's ovens are a bit slow. You know your own oven. So you don't want these to brown, you want them to be golden, but these, as I say, are a little bit thinner than the recipe, so I think I'll only cook them for 10 minutes and we'll see what happens. So that's your shortbread biscuits. So this dough, which is over, I'm just going to roll together like that. I'm going to put it in a plastic bag in my fridge, and when I next need some shortbread biscuits, my dough is all ready. This will keep in the fridge for a couple of weeks. And when I'm ready, I can make some more biscuits. Remember, when taking things out of the oven, make sure that you have somebody adult to help you with that. So let's have a look and see whether we think they're done. So going to lift one up. They're still very soft. They're still very pale. I'd like to put those back in for 2 or 3 more minutes. Not a lot. They've retained their shape quite nicely. You see they've slightly gone into each other. So when you cook them, make sure you leave a space. The front row is fine. The back row is... They will harden up on just sitting on a baking sheet. But they're still a little bit soft underneath. So I'm going to pop them in for a further 10 minutes. 2 or 3 minutes. This is why we're demonstrating and showing you that not everything is exactly as per the recipe. So the recipe says cook for 10 minutes. I would say maybe 12, but again it depends on the fierceness of your oven. Or you could potentially put the oven, if your oven is fairly slow, you could potentially put the oven up a little bit, but you don't want them to brown. So that's why I say 10 minutes. You won't ruin them by taking them out of the oven, checking them, and then putting them back. And you'll know if they're not quite cooked. They're still a bit, if you lift one up, as I did, it nearly broke. So that's not cooked. They want to start to be hard. Let's just go back to the oven for the shortbread now. They smell better. So, told you have to be careful with hot things. So, I want to show you what they look like now. Very hot again, so be careful. They will continue to crisp up. You could put them on a cooling rack once they've come out of the oven. There we are. There are your fingers, which are lovely. And they are still a little bit, I mean, you really probably should keep them on the baking tray for a few minutes. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have some happy cooking.